The biggest fail of this MSNBC event definitely had to do with something that I think most people would overlook, and it was Trump's statement on private prisons. Here's what he had to say.
What do you see needs to be reformed with our prison system? And with that, what do you think about drug legalization playing into the reform?
I think that as far as drug legalization, we talk about marijuana, and in terms of medical, I think I am basically for that. I've heard some wonderful things in terms of medical. I'm watching Colorado very carefully, see what's happening out there. I'm getting some very negative reports. I'm getting some okay reports, but I'm getting some very negative reports coming out of Colorado as to what's happening. So we'll see what happens. And I think a lot of people are really looking at Colorado for prison reform. I think, as you know, our prison system is a disaster. It's a complete disaster. All over the country. Almost everything we have, Chris, if you want to know the truth, is a disaster.
Really? America's not great.
If you take a look,
it's not bad.
Look, our military has been depleted. Our vets are not being taken care of. I mean, we have a lot of problems. Okay. But
why does everybody want to come here if we're not great? Everybody in the world wants to come here, and everybody does better in this country than where they came from.
Yeah,
everybody.
Other people have problems, too. By the way, with prisons, I do think we can do a lot of privatizations and private prisons. It seems to work a lot better.
There it is.
He said it.
Prison for profit.
Okay.
Prison for profit.
I'm about to give you guys a history lesson on private prisons because this is one of the topics that I'm obsessed with, okay? I've been researching this for years. Private prisons started popping up in the U.S. in the mid-1980s, and part of the reason why is because Republicans became so tough on drugs that they realized that our prison system was full to the brim with nonviolent drug offenders. So all of a sudden, the private industry realized, wait a minute, we can make a lot of money off these people that get caught smoking a doobie. Okay, so all of a sudden, Geo Group and Corrections Corporation of America start increasing throughout the country. And then you have states like Louisiana that imprison an insane amount of people. The United States imprisons more people than any other country in the world because we now have a profit motive. We have corporations that have a profit motive to imprison as many Americans as possible, regardless of what their crimes are, regardless of whether or not they're a threat to society, okay? I'm sorry, but I don't think marijuana smokers are a threat to society, especially when we now have states that are legalizing it for not only medicinal use, but also recreational use. We now have around 3,000 people that are serving life sentences without the chance of parole for non-violent offenses, many of which are drug-related. So there's a reason for that, okay? When you have corporations with a profit motive to lock people up, well, they work with politicians, they join organizations like ALEC and lobby politicians for tough-on-crime legislation. So we have issues like SB 1070 in Arizona, which was that anti-immigrant law that went after Mexican immigrants. What they do is they detain them for years before deporting them. Why would we use taxpayer money to detain them for years before deporting them? It's because these prisons make money off of detaining them, okay? So it's counterproductive. And they call themselves private prisons, but they're funded with our taxpayer money. And they're not more successful than other prisons. What they do is they get to cherry pick the types of inmates they take in. Many of the inmates do not need any type of mental health care, for instance. They're not difficult criminals to deal with, like high security or high risk inmates, those who have been convicted of murder and things like that. So they get to choose the easiest inmates, and they sign contracts with state lawmakers for minimum occupancy, which means that they have to make sure that the state pays them for 90% of their beds, even if those beds are not full. That's what's happening with private prisons in America. Donald Trump is a buffoon. He has no idea how terrible this system has been for this country, and he has no idea how ironic it is that we call ourselves the land of the free while we imprison more people than any other country in the world. So that was the biggest fail. And it was also a fail on Chris Matthews' part for not fact-checking him there, probably because Chris Matthews has no idea how terrible private prisons have been for this country.
Well, I don't know if you, I think right after that interview, they cut to lockup.
Yeah.
I don't think that.
Good point.
I don't think his bosses are necessarily against private prisons. I don't think he's against private prisons. I think that his candidate of choice is for private prisons. His candidate of choice, by the way, don't forget, he said last week that if Hillary Clinton was smart, he would put John Kasich on the. She would put John Kasich on the ticket as her vice president to unify. because the Republicans are dismayed with Donald Trump, and millions of them won't vote for him. So to bring the country together, she should put a guy, John Kasich, who just signed anti-abortion legislation.
I was just thinking that.
On the ticket. In case she dies, he could be the president. Fantastic, Chris. And that's the usual Chris Matthews. That's why the guy tonight, I don't know who the hell that guy was, because that's not the usual Chris Matthews. The usual Chris Matthews is bowing down to power. He's propping up the establishment. He's telling Donald Trump that I also feel fascistic. Well, right along with you, he's saying put a guy who denies abortion on the ticket with someone who claims she's fought her whole life for women's right to choose. This is the kind of stuff Chris Matthews normally does. So tonight you can understand why this was really out of character. And what this does reveal is that people like Chris Matthews have the ability to do this all the time. And they don't do it out of choice. And why don't they do it? Just the way our friend Tony, the MSNBC reporter, revealed to us 2 nights ago, they don't do this because if he does this all the time, he won't get access all the time. And so he knows that access is more important than real journalism. And real journalism can hurt his access, which means he won't be able to get the interviews, or they won't be able to sell soap with a picture of him sitting next to a powerful person. And that's all that matters. So that's why tonight was weird. It makes me even, in a weird way, more upset with Chris Matthews because he doesn't do this almost never.
Yeah.
You brought up a great point.
Thank you,
Anna.
I did.
No, yours is terrible. But Anna did. No, I'm kidding. Anna brought up the minimum, the 90% occupancy. They just get paid even if they don't have the people, which sounds to me like the people who made the deal between the government and the private prisons didn't get a good deal. Maybe if we had a president who could get good deals, maybe we get rid of that. Maybe then,
Yes.
So here's
hypothetically, maybe then you like the private prisons?
so here's the
No?
I hate private prisons.
Yeah,
and
me
I
too.
hate private prisons because they're locking up people who have drug addictions, who need rehabilitation, who need our compassion, as opposed to us criminalizing them. There's a reason why the recidivism rate is so high in the US. It's because we now have a profit motive. It's not about rehabilitating people. It's about ensuring that they're repeat offenders and we can continue locking them away. It's disgusting.
Yeah.